Shalom, and welcome to the Parasha Pod. I'm Rav Mordechai Rosenberg, here with Rav Menachem Leibtag, and we are talking Torah together.
A double Parasha.
Matot-Masei and Chazak. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, it's time to learn. Rav Leibtag, Matot-Masei has got a lot going on, and I want to start with something that bothers me, and I think bothers a lot of people, which is that there seems to be quite a brutal scene that happens in this parasha.
Not only one. There's brutality throughout the whole. There's a lot of death going on.
Yeah. We have the war against Midian, and the Jewish people have a wonderful victory against them, and then they bring home the spoils, including a lot of women.
Okay. I see where you're going, but before you start, I don't have an answer. I wish I did.
So then they bring them home as sort of prisoners of war, and Moshe says to kill them.
Yeah.
So,
which is difficult. No.
Yeah.
I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to give a whole approach because there's a lot of big questions about how do we treat all these events that are happening in the end of Sefer Bamidbar?
Yeah.
And are these laws for future generations? Or are this a one-time event which is at the early level of our becoming a nation? In other words, we're going to find a whole set of laws. In fact, you know what? I think the best thing to do is let's read the last line of the book. Because the last line of the book tells us a lot. Because we're ending, as you mentioned, this is Chazak. Right? Look at the wording of the last line of the book of Sefer Bamidbar.
All right, so I'm reading from chapter 36, verse 13. Ela hamitzvot v'hamishpatim asher tzivah Hashem b'yad Moshe b'nei Yisrael b'avon Moav ayoden yireicho.
That's a beautiful summary, right?
These are the mitzvot, the commandments, and the statutes.
Listen carefully. Asher, with the Asher what? Asher
tzivah Hashem, that God commanded b'yad Moshe.
That's unique. We don't have that usually.
Okay.
Usually,
to the hand of
God
Moses.
commanded Moshe. At the end of Sefer Vayikra, we have the laws that God commanded Moshe.
Right.
Now, these are laws that God gave b'yad Moshe.
To the hand of Moses.
Through the hand of Moses. That God commanded through the hand of Moses. Right?
To Bnei
teach Bnei Israel. Where?
Ba'arvot Moav.
Opposite Yericho. Now, where should all the mitzvot been given?
At Har Sinai.
Yeah, that's right. These were not given in Har Sinai. Look at the last line of Sefer Vayikra. What's it going to say?
Hold on a second. So
it's nice and simple there.
Last line. Ela mitzvot asher tzivah Hashem et Moshe el bnei Yisrael b'Har Sinai.
That makes sense. These are mitzvot that God gave Moshe to tell bnei Yisrael, not biyad Moshe, and not in Arbot Moav, rather on Har Sinai biyad Moshe. I mean, God told Moshe to teach the people.
Right.
And the end of Parasha. That's the phrase almost everywhere when we have a summary.
Okay.
Now, and the mitzvot were given. That's what Har Sinai was about. The Mishkan itself was built at Har Sinai.
Yeah.
Remember, and when we leave Har Sinai in Parashat Balotra, we should have gone right to Israel and kept all the mitzvot. We had a Mishkan, the Shekhinah was with us, we were ready to go. For some reason, there's another set of mitzvot that are given where? In Arbot Moav.
Right.
Now, that's not a summary of the end. The line we read at the end of Sefer Bamidbar is not summarizing the book. It's summarizing the last section of the book, which, as it says, it's a set of laws that God gave the people of Israel through the agency of Moshe, B'yad Moshe, and they're all about the first wave of conquest of the land. It's what's called a mitzvat sha'ah. Remember we saw in Sefer Bamidbar the story and the laws, like the mifkad, the census they take, the chatzotzot in the beginning for the travel. Everything we're doing there, the galim, etc. Those are mitzvot sha'ah. Those are mitzvot for that generation. We don't have galim. We don't have a mitzvah to have flags. Maybe on Simchas Torah we still have flags, but we don't have tribal flags we have to keep.
Right.
That was the thing. That was for that generation. Now, there's going to be a whole set of mitzvot, and there's a unit. In fact, if you want to see the unit, remember the Masot, which is also interesting. Remember how Parashat begins?
Right.
These are Masot that Moshe wrote down. Api Hashem b'yad Moshe. As we take that phrase, which is in the beginning of Masei, Api Hashem b'yad Moshe, and we put it to V'sot Torah.
Sorry, in the beginning of Masei, we have...
It says, Elo Masei b'nei, these are the Masot. We summarize all the different stops. Right? And who guided us through the desert?
B'yad Moshe v'Aharon. Okay.
See, we have the word B'yad Moshe again?
Yeah.
But it's Api Hashem. It emphasizes Api Hashem. And we said, who decided where we're going? Who leads us through the desert?
God is doing it. And
Moshe is his agent.
Right. Moses wrote that the starting points and their marches by the word of Hashem. Right.
But that phrase comes up a lot. Now, My point is that I can't take these laws and apply them to future generations. They don't apply that. Setting up the cities of the Levites. There needs to be cities for Levites, but the specific ones we're setting up. The number of cities. Those are the borders of land. That's for the first wave of conquest that God's giving us.
Right.
The people who are going to give out the land. We're going to push the Bantchilim Mosi. There's a lot of the laws of the deal with Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven, etc. All those things, those are all events that relate to the first wave of conquest of the land, of the Transjordan, and the land of Canaan later on. Now, what's interesting is that these are commandments that Moshe will not fulfill because he's not going to go with them. But even though he's not going to be, they should be given to Yeshua.
As in setting up these cities and stuff.
Setting up the cities of refuge, setting up the basically conquering the land. That'll be fulfilled by Yeshua.
Right.
But the mitzvah of what's called Ha'arashta, so it's conquering the land and setting up the land and setting up the inheritances. That will be, the laws are going to be given by Moshe, but they'll be fulfilled by somebody else, by Yeshua. But it's, even though Moshe won't do it, it's sort of a goodbye present. You get to charge it. You get to deliver the mitzvot. But it's a separate unit of mitzvot, and therefore I can't take these mitzvot at the end of the book and say these apply to future generations. Now,
I see.
I'm gonna get in trouble now.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
So just to tie it back to my original question. So you're saying, whatever the reason may be, at least we can be sure that these prisoners of war were killed in this time, and it's not any statement by the Torah that you can generally do something.
I don't learn from there. When I take prisoners of war, I massacre them all and kill them. We don't learn. We don't.
Right.
That's not for Psak Halacha. That's not Jewish law. That's not dated. In fact, one of the most beautiful lines, I think, which counters all this, is the end of chapter 35. We set aside cities of refuge.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about murder because in society, murder tends to happen. But the final law, after we set aside cities of refuge, there's a law that if someone is found guilty of murder and should be put to death, you can't take ransom money instead of putting him to death. If a person needs to go into exile to a city of refuge, he can't pay ransom money. It's called kofar, and go there. You have to do the punishment. Okay? And then he gives a reason why. But it's not that we want to punish the person. We want to limit. We don't want bloodshed happening in our land. Yeah. Look at the last three lines.
Okay.
What verse is it?
Right. That's 32, right?
Verse 32. Lo tichu kofar lenefesh rotzeach.
Yep. Don't take a bribe or a ransom. L'nus el ir meklato, to flee to a city of refuge.
No, he's supposed to flee to a city, and he said, "I don't want to. I'll pay money instead." No.
L'shuv l'shevet be'eretz ad motogaim, to stay there and live until the death of the Kohen. Lo tachanifu et aretz.
There's a big line. V'lo tachnifu et aretz. Don't defile the land. Listen carefully now.
Asher atem ba ki adam hu yachanif et haaretz. That you're in, because blood will make the land defiled.
In other words, the worst thing, if innocent blood is spilled in the land, that's the worst thing possible.
Right. If
someone commits murder, remember, the land won't tolerate murder happening until we find the murder and execute justice. In fact, if I remember the Noachite laws back in the beginning of Chumash, that's the main Noachite law. We claim there's 7, but the explicit one is it's okay to eat an animal, but you can't eat the animal alive. But if you can kill an animal to eat it, you can't kill a fellow human being. And the final line, shofech dam adam ba'adam, b'damo yishofech, means you can't. If someone commits murder, you put him to death. Why? Kibitzelim elim asat adam. Man is made in the image of God, and Chumash doesn't tolerate murder of any human being. We're talking about all humankind at that time, not just the Jewish people. And therefore, if we're God's people living in a land set aside to represent God, it can't be that our land is known for a place of murder. It just can't be. Now, listen to the next line. Right. Don't defile the land. Don't make the land tameh, unclean.
That you're dwelling in. That I am dwelling in.
Got it. This is the land that you're dwelling in, that I'm dwelling in. Meaning, the land that you're living in, you, the Jewish people living in a land, if you're representing me, my Shekhinah is there. So my Shekhinah can't rest with the land if there's a land that people were committing murder. We have the same thing in Sefer Dvarim several times, but with the story of the Egla Rufa, when there's an unsolved murder, we have to solve the murder. We can't say, who cares? Mm-hmm. Every murder case needs to be solved. We have to do our best to solve it. We can't tolerate murder happening and innocent people dying. And therefore, Chumash is super sensitive to human life. Now, that's a super duper, that's the principle of Chumash. From the Noachite laws, from the Rainbow Covenant after the flood, all the way through Lo Tirtzach at the beginning of the second half of the Ten Commandments. Mm-hmm. So Chumash doesn't want people committing murder. That's clear. Now, there might be situations in war where unfortunately it needs to happen. And that commandment, we're assuming God is just and he makes his decisions. But Chumash doesn't tell us, and Chumash doesn't tell us, the Jewish people, when we go to war, kill all the captives. It might be in that specific situation, there might have been a reason for it. It's hard for us to understand, but that's not a law for all future generations. But the principles we have from Chumash are these ones. That God can't tolerate a land where people commit murder.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so to summarize, number one, we can show, based off the concluding line of the book and the other kind of structural lines, that this law was a one-time only law, and it's not a principle to be extended for other times. And number two, we can see that the
principles and laws we get at Har Sinai,
right, and those are certainly against the idea of murdering anybody that's innocent, including a prisoner of war.
Yeah, it would seem that way if I follow the other. Remember, also Loim Tuvot Abanim, it says in Devarim. Mm-hmm. There's tons of laws we received on Har Sinai that emphasize the importance of human life.
Right.
And no other story can override that. Mm-hmm. Those are the principles. If something happened in a specific story, we have to ask why. Now, when it comes to the other question is, when we conquer the land of Israel, what are we supposed to do? Now, here's where there's a famous argument whether there's an eternal commandment to conquer the land of Israel. Mm-hmm. Famous Ramban and Rambam, which is also in this week in Matot-Masei, the end of chapter 33, where it says, you're crossing the Jordan River. Okay? This is one of the commandments which was given in Avot Moab, not on Har Sinai, but in the plains of Moab to the new generation ready to go in. It says, when you come in the land, conquer the land, which I'm giving you to set up your land, and then settle the land, etc. And if you don't kick them out, they'll kick you out, which is pretty good advice.
Right.
Now,
So hold on. So that itself contains within it somewhat of another potentially brutal note of saying you have to expel the existing inhabitants of the land.
Yeah, but now this was all explained in Har Sinai much more carefully. Mm-hmm. That was go back to Sefer Vayikra chapter 18, which we happen to read at Mincha and Yom Kippur.
Okay.
It says, when you come to the land of Israel, don't act like the Egyptians, don't act like the Canaanites. You saw what they braved. That's because of their corrupt culture. Don't act like them. Mm-hmm. When we get rid of idol worship and wipe it out, that's the assumption idol worship is something evil that causes corrupt behavior. And that's what Chumash says. The reason we fight idol worship is because it's corrupting our society. Mm-hmm. If it's not corrupting our society, that's a big question. Halacha about what's considered idol worship today. There's a famous Meiri that considers the so-called monotheistic religion is not classic idol worship. That's a topic for halachic discussion. But I'm talking about the theme of Chumash. Why do we need to know that this was a one-time commandment to wipe out these 7 nations? What's it say? So first it says, don't act like them. Mm-hmm. Then we have the list of arayot, incest, and all this terrible behavior that the people of Canaan did. Mm-hmm. And that's why God's kicking them out. And it says afterwards in chapter 18 in Vayikra, verse 24, don't defile yourself with all these things. That's what they did. That's why I'm sending them out.
Yep.
And I'm giving you're in essence, they're being punished for their bad behavior. Mm-hmm. The 7 nations aren't being punished because they're living in the land of the Jewish people. Okay? Right. We're not throwing them out because they took our land. It's their land. It's called Eretz Canaan, the first Rashi in Chumash. Mm-hmm. The land originally was given to them. God took it away from them because of their bad behavior. And it's giving it to us in order to be good and be his model nation, but the land belongs to God.
Yeah.
But that's the theme all through Chumash. It's the first Rashi in Chumash. Mm-hmm. We need to know that because then it says later on, don't you dare act like the Canaanites, because if you act like them, I'll throw you out. And if you read Sefer Melachim Bet, chapter 21, that's exactly what the Navi says. Yirmiyahu says in the end of Sefer Melachim, the reason I'm throwing you out is because you're acting like the Amorites did, and you have no right to be here. So I need to know about wiping out the 7 nations of Canaan, not to know that the land belongs to us. I need to know that we have a responsibility to the land. But if we misbehave in this land because we're representing God, we might have the same fate. Now,
okay, fascinating. So that means that we shouldn't learn from the fact that we have to expel the inhabitants of the land that it's good to commit ethnic cleansing in general, but rather we should learn that almost the opposite message, that we must remain just, honorable, and
keep the mitzvot of the
and
Torah,
righteous,
and do a good job representing God, making His name great.
Right.
And if we do a lousy job, we can have the same fate.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it says here. It says it again at the end of chapter 20 in Sefer Vayikra.
Right.
Remember, if you do that, that's why I'm throwing them out. If you act the same way, I'll throw you out. And that's why we're thrown out at the end of the first temple period. Explicit again in chapter 20 in Malachim Bet.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't learn from here the land of Israel belongs to us. It belongs to God. We have a responsibility to the land. And God gives us opportunities to settle the land and develop there. And we have a commandment to stay in the land and develop it as much as we can. That's Parasha B'taris Bishat Memba. But we need to know that if we misbehave in the land, He'll take it away. It's when we get to Sefer Dvarim, it's like 20 times in Sefer Dvarim. On what condition? We had this when we discussed the sin of the spies also. Why don't the spies go in? Why didn't the first generation go in? Because they're not ready. They're not committed to be keeping these mitzvot. That's why, remember, we explained that's why the leadership is not going to work. They said, let's go back to Egypt instead. They didn't want to take the challenge. But now, God tells us, if we misbehave, He'll throw us out. But unlike the 7 nations, one day we're going to come back. That's we're eternally God's people. And we always have the destiny of returning to our land and becoming His nation. And God might create opportunities, but God has to bring us back. How God brings you back? Ask your local religious Zionist teacher. No, it's how many hints does God have to give us? It's time to come home. Yeah, that's through Isaiah. That's Yeshayahu from chapter Mem. Remember Koresh? It's Koresh's declaration. He says that's God telling you, get out of Babel. Time to come back to Israel. God might send us indicators He wants us to come back.
Right.
Now, when to come back? Again, that's an interesting discussion. But
so you're saying when like the Nevi'im already tell us to expect signs, not necessarily from a prophet or from a voice from heaven, but through the workings of the political declarations of this world, such as the declaration of Cyrus or maybe
Balfour.
Right.
And then the question, does it develop or not? Now, but all the prophets say there will be redemption, but redemption happens. It's a two-way street. Right. So God gives us opportunities of redemption, but the purpose of redemption is to be that nation that God wants us to be. But if we don't do it properly, if we don't act our side, it won't be complete. That's like the main message of all the later Nevi'im. Everyone who promises redemption says it's redemption. Now, God might bring us back even if we're not ready on the condition that's Yechezkel. And Yirmiyahu says He'll bring us back when we're ready. That's Yirmiyahu, chapters 31, 32, 33. In Yechezkel, in chapters 36 and 37, He says, I'll bring you back even if you're not ready, but when I come back, I'll cleanse you, and then I'll make you ready here. So that was the big machloek, what's called B'itach Yishena. Sooner or later we'll come back, and I might make it sooner if you're ready. But ultimately we'll come back whether we're ready or not. But once we come back, we have to be ready. And
do you see either of those a parallel to the sort of the first exile or the second exile? Like we came back after 70 years, and that was predicted, and it wasn't necessarily predicated on us being ready. Is that why this one has maybe taken so long, because we're waiting for being ready?
That's the Gemara in Yoma, I think Yud Aleph, either Ted or Yud Aleph. But Yoma talks about when it talks about Sinat Chinam.
Right.
And so remember I told you there's always good reasons for baseless hatred?
Yeah.
The Gemara talks about, look how bad baseless hatred is, because the first temple was destroyed for the big three. Yeah. Remember? For murder, remember? Idol worship and adultery and arayot. The second temple, the people were all religious, but they weren't nice to one another. They had always good reasons for baseless hatred. Yeah. And despite those three terrible sins, cardinal sins of the first temple period, we came back after 70 years. The Gemara is talking about hundreds of years after the second temple was destroyed, and we haven't come back yet. That's a proof how bad Sinat Chinam is. Yeah. In that context, but we'll come back. But that the Gemara is emphasizing how important getting along, every Jew getting along with one another, not having reasons to hate each other. how critical that is to becoming our nation. Read Zechariah chapter 7 and 8, especially the end of chapter Zechariah 8. What do you need to do? It's God's in the beginning of Sheni, God's bringing us back. Remember, Ish at Avat Re'el, but don't be mean to your fellow Jew. Be kind and love and being strive for peace and doing do justice, righteousness, etc. That's the whole idea of Mishlach Manot Ish L'Re'ehu we talked about in Purim time. So those are all. That's the way the prophets read it. So we don't study Chumash. Oh, we have to kill every prisoner of war, and we have to be. The main thing we need to be worthy of the land. It's how we behave as a nation. If war breaks out, we have to defend ourselves. That's for sure, and we have to be involved in defending ourselves. But if we want to make sure it doesn't happen again, if we want God to help us in our war, we have to show God we're worthy, and we want to take that challenge of being a nation representing God. That's what Tefillah is about, pretty much. That's how the prophets understood it. That's how the rabbis understood it.
Amazing.
In other words, Chumash wasn't there to give us political advice of how to fight a war. No, that's not. Chumash tell you that God oversees everything, and a war is one of God's tools. As a wake-up call for reward or punishment, depending, how good we're doing. And if you want to win a war, of course, you have to fight the war. But if you want God on your team, you have to be worthy of God's help.
Okay. So you touched on political issues.
I try to stay away from the political side of it.
Around fighting wars. But there is one line that has been brought up a lot lately that is coming from a Parasha. And it's been brought up with relation to a very hot button political issue in Israel. And the line is relating to the two tribes, Reuven and Gad. They want to stay on the Transjordan and the East Bank, and Moshe says to them, will your brothers go out to war and you your brother going to go to war and you're going to stay here and not do anything? Now, but I don't think it's similar to nowadays, because there we're talking about all the tribes about to conquer the land, and each tribe getting its portion of land. Well, when we conquered the Transjordan area, all 12 tribes were involved. Right? So the conquest was done by everybody. Reuven, Gad, and Chatzi Menashe, they want to stay in Transjordan. So everyone did the fighting, and they got their part. And it's not fair that only the other tribes are going to conquer the rest of the Canaan, and they're not going to take part. Right.
And so what he's saying, what's not fair is that how come everyone fought for you and you got your reward already, and now you're jumping out? And therefore, what's their answer? No. But more than that, we'll be the front line. What was the biggest danger in taking Canaan? Was the walled cities. If they say we'll be the chalutzim, so it's not we're going to fight with you, we're going to be the front line, we're going to be in the most dangerous units fighting the land of Israel, which will make it much easier for you to conquer. So Moshe's warning is correct, but that wasn't their intention. Their intention was, listen, we did such a good job conquering, let's settle this part. Of course we're going to come and help you. Sure, they have to get it in writing. But no one disagrees with it. No, they're not saying Moshe Rabbeinu, no, you're wrong. We're staying here no matter what. Then we're not going to help. They said, no, you misunderstood our intention.
Right.
But he has to get it in writing, pretty much.
Okay, but
the principle makes sense, of course. If everyone shares in the profits of the conquest, everyone has to share in the conquest.
Yeah.
The other question, Shevet Levi, that's a different question.
Yeah, well, that is the question. I mean,
that's the question nowadays. Who's Shevet Levi?
Right. But hold on. And what was Shevet Levi's role as well? I mean, Moshe can say to Reuven and Gad, you can't, will your brothers go out to war and you remain here? But Shevet Levi, do they accompany the tribes to war in any way? I mean, they're counted differently. They're seemingly, because they're not soldiers, but
they're not part of the regular army. In as I say, like when everyone's life is on the line and they're needed, then that's something they all do. But they're again, that's already a more specific question, depending on the generation, how many soldiers you have, and what happens if they don't fight. Yeah, I think it's hard to. The principle in Chumash is I need to set aside a tribe or a cadre of people who are dedicated to Jewish education, keeping the Torah going, teaching it. I think everyone agrees on that. Now, there's a need for at least 10% of the population or so. Take one of the 12 tribes, comes out 8%, whatever it is, Shevet Levi. But one tribe, I want to make sure that the Torah is always taught to every generation. So if every tribe gets their inheritance in Nachalah, become agriculture and farmers, etc., who's going to sit and learn? So I'm going to dedicate one tribe.
Teach.
They're not going to get any land. Their Nachalah will be, we're going to support them with the Maser, with the 10% tax. But their job is to teach. But they're part of the war effort. So in a war effort as well, even in an army, you have you have people in charge of education. Not everyone is combat soldier. Even in a regular army, everyone has their job to do. So there's a need for a group of people in any society to be the experts and the people studying the Torah, keeping it going. I think no one would disagree on that.
So you're saying Shevet Levi, even at that time, was not, maybe some of them were sitting and learning Torah, but some of them were also
working in the Mishkan. There were civil servants.
Right.
They were carrying the Mishkan. They were educators, teachers, judges. The idea of just sitting and learning all day and not doing anything else, that's a more modern phenomenon, I think. But that's a different, again, that's beyond the scope of our discussion. I think Chumash is, remember, first I said every family has a firstborn who has to teach Torah, be dedicated to God, and I moved that responsibility to the entire tribe. That was more of a practical decision. But the idea that Am Yisrael, to be God's people, has to have a tribe of Kohanim, of Levim, of people dedicated to education, who aren't part of the regular economy, but they're supported by the economy, that makes sense. That's a logical thing, and that's critical for Torah study to continue and to be passed on from generation to generation. I need experts in that. Just like every society, you have modern day times, I have people who are experts in physics and math and sciences, etc., and medicine, who might just study in depth, the theoretical part, but they're going to be the teachers who are going to develop technology and industry. So if Torah is going to be our guide, I need experts in Torah, not just knowing the Torah, but how to apply it, how to derive principles, and how to apply it in new situations. But what to do in a specific situation, and nowadays, that's beyond the scope of, that's not my decision to make, I have my own opinions, but that's not, my opinion is as good as anyone else's. But the idea that everyone should join in the effort and work together, peacefully about it, that for sure is important. It's a legitimate argument about, but how we argue about it is what's most important. And seeing the value in both sides. Both sides should see there's a value of the Torah study, there's a value in fighting. And you shouldn't see one as, no one is, taking people, no one's stealing people and forcing conscription and taking away from Torah study and things like that. But that's not, you can't exaggerate how evil either side is. And with good communication, anyway, then again, I don't want to get into modern day politics. I know my own opinion, but that's really not that important.
So essentially, how we engage in the discussion is more important than the conclusion.
And always understanding what the goal of our nationhood is. The goal is not just living in the land, the goal is being a nation representing God in the land. So how we act as God's nation, our values, how we talk, how we speak, how we fight wars. There's laws of fighting wars. Remember, first you open for peace, and then you try to make. But when you fight, you have to fight. You can't be naive. But on the other hand, you have a goal of being kind and nice, and human life is important.
Okay.
We talked about that last week, about the Pinchas needs, after his, he goes and kills somebody, he needs a brit shalom. I have to tame that kadaut. I read somewhere this week that, the way Hillel in Pirkei Avot understands the brit shalom is that we should be students of our own. Ohev shalom, v'rodev shalom. So why can't you just say just loving peace? How come rodev shalom? Rodev, this week's Parasha,
chasing peace.
Usually rodev comes with zealotry. When someone, the goel hadam, when you avenge someone's death, you're rodev. So we take the verb of rodev, which usually is in the context of murder, or chasing someone to chances of death, basically, and using that for peace. I think that's a beautiful commentary on Parshat Pinchas last week of the Brit Shalom.
Interesting. So he has to use his kind of zealousness, his kind of his almost violent tendency
to pursue peace. With vengeance. No, it's to take that religions to pursue peace, which is what it says in Malachi as well.
All right.
Okay.
Very good.
Anyway, so that's a nice ending. So again, I don't have specific answers, but that's a question on God, not a question on. But God's not commanding us. That's the one-time event why God said to do that. That's something that it's good we have a question mark about it.
Right. Wow. Well, thank you so much, I feel like I've learned a lot, even if
You don't agree?
we haven't had maybe full clarity like sometimes. But thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us, and wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. Thanks for joining us.